STEM 20 will be looking at how does training affect performance, and as we see by the two arrows here, we're going to be concentrating on types of training and training methods. In particular, we're going to look at the aerobic training, with examples being continuous fartlek, aerobic interval and circuit, and also the anaerobic, looking at the anaerobic interval. Types of training and the training methods. You can see here that we have 4 different types of training which will come under the umbrella of aerobic training. We have fartlek training, we have continuous training, there is circuit training, and there is aerobic interval training. They are the 4 areas that relate to aerobic training that we would need to have some understanding of. The first area that we'll look at here will be continuous training. And the easy thing to remember here is that this is one of the most common forms of some type of aerobic training. Because it is performed continuously, it should be looking for around about 20 minutes of duration. Hence the name continuous training, continuously moving. It goes for a longer period of time or a long duration. The emphasis on the heart rate to try and elevate the heart rate. And we said 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes would be a minimum time to be concentrating on the activity for, up to anything from 2 hours plus, based on the ability of the person who is doing the actual performance of continuous training. The only issue really with continuous training is that it would not really be that specific for people who want to do specific training for a certain sport, okay, because it's just one pace for a longer period of time. There is no real change in the speed or intensity during the activity. But that's continuous training. See the picture here of a person going for a run, anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour and a half. That will be a form of continuous training. The second area we're going to look at is aerobic interval training. We need to work out here that this interval training, this is just a breakdown of the training period into intervals of exercise or work, followed by a rest part. So they're going to do a form of exercise, then they'll be given some type of break. The emphasis of this one, or the importance of the aerobic interval training, is it talks about it can be a bit more specific for the demands of the sport. It also allows for longer period of time at a higher intensity because there is a rest period. The athlete can perform for longer periods of time at a higher intensity, higher heart rate. The rest interval, which is also part of interval training, can be any type of interval they like and or rest period, and it could be along the lines of whether they're walking or jogging slowly, which is always important. The beauty of the rest period, if there is some movement occurring, is it helps to assist in the removal of the lactic acid that accumulates in the blood and which would fatigue out an athlete. So the fact that during their rest period they're actually doing some form of walking or some slow jogging, this helps get rid of lactic acid, which then will allow them to continue to train for a longer period of time. I've given a couple of little examples down the bottom here. We look at, a runner might run 1,200 metres and then walk for half a lap, then repeat the process 4 or 5 times. Or another example might be a 100-metre run under 20 seconds with 40 seconds rest going every minute. So they're 2 different types of interval training, and we've got aerobic interval training in there because they're going for a longer period of time. They're not short, they're longer distances. So that's the aerobic interval training. Our next one is going to be fartlek training. The easy thing to think about fartlek training is that it's a Swedish name for speed play. So it's going to have an element of speed in its training. And as I said, it's a combination of continuous training and interval training, which involves a continuous effort with high periods of intensity followed by a recovery period. So the burst of speed could be 5 to 10 seconds duration and then a repeat every 2 to 3 minutes. So an example could be here, and we'll see an example on the next page, but going for a sprint for 10 seconds, then jogging for 1 minute. Going for a sprint for 10 seconds, jogging for a minute. On this page here, you'll see that we've given an example of fartlek training session. The important is that the first 3 points talks about just, but it is an example, and the warm-up is important, making sure that the person is warmed up, gone for a bit of a jog, they've stretched. Then we start to get into our actual form of fartlek training. So if you look down at points number 3 and 4, we've got run for 800 to 1,500 metres at a fast, steady pace, then walk for 3 minutes. So there's a difference already in the intensity that the person is training at. Number 5, they run continuously for 2,000 metres, interspersing with 50-metre sprints every 300 metres. So they're jogging, or they're running, I should say, then they get into a sprint. Then they're jogging into a sprint. That's fartlek. That's the change between a jog and a sprint, which can be very, very specific to different sports. Again, so they're just some examples there. Now the bottom talks about obviously cooling down and warming down. The last area we've got here is the circuit training. Circuit training, for those who may not be sure what it is, it's an arrangement of exercises that require the athlete to spend some time completing an exercise before going on to the next one. So there might be anywhere from 6 to 10, it could be more, based on the number of people that are involved, but they're doing the activity. They might do it for a period of time or a number of reps, which we'll look at in a minute, before moving on to the next activity. The beauty of this is that we obviously change exercises, so it's continually moving around the gym. So variety is important here. Looking at different body parts so they can be altered. So you're not going to do maybe 2 chest exercises in a row because it's going to fatigue the muscle. So you might go from a chest to a back to a legs to a shoulder to an arms, just to give you each different body part a break. Down the bottom here it says that there are 2 different types of circuits that can be performed during circuit training. One can be fixed resistance circuits and the other one can be individual resistance. We're going to have a look at both of those two now just to make sure we all have an understanding. But first of all, this page here just gives you an understanding or a little bit of an idea of what some form of a circuit might consist of. We've just got 10 stations here and it ranges from sit-ups to step-ups to press-ups to squats to shuttle runs to burpees to bent arm pullovers and to straddle jumps. So the contestants or the people, athletes would rotate themselves around the 10 different stations. That's an example of a circuit training. So we spoke about fixed resistance before, and what we're looking at when we come to fixed resistance is that the fixed resistance is the number of repetitions of fixed. So for example, the athlete's going to sit down at the bench press and they're going to complete 20 reps. So 20 times they've got to move that thing there. Okay, and the advantage of this system is that you can actually record the time that it takes to perform the fixed resistance and keep measuring the person's progress and have a bit of a log of how they're performing. So for example, a person may perform 20 sit-ups, 20 push-ups, 100 skips and so on, and see how long it takes them to do the whole thing. So that's fixed resistance. So the resistance is fixed. The next one's going to be the individual resistance. And individual resistance circuits, which I think are more popular and more common, is where the resistance is fixed and as many repetitions as possible is given in a period of time. So for example, what we're going to do, we've got 50 kilos on the bench press. The athlete's going to perform as many reps as they can on that weight in the 30 seconds. Then they move on to the next activity. So instead of the resistance being changed, here we've got a set resistance, but they're going for a period of time, and it's how many they can do of that weight. So before they might, in the other one, they were doing 20 reps for a fixed resistance, 20 reps on the bench press. Now they're working on time for individual resistance where it might be 30 seconds. They might be able to punch out 25 to 30 reps based on their ability level. So that's the individual resistance. Then we break off into the anaerobic training. So we looked at aerobic, now we're looking at anaerobic. Anaerobic meaning without oxygen. So anaerobic training involves activities requiring the use of the 2 anaerobic energy systems, which are going to be the ATP-PC system, which we've already looked at, and also the lactic acid system. The emphasis on this system is being anaerobic. It's got to be short, it's got to be powerful, explosive, and quite fast. And with the aim being to get the heart rate up around 85% of the maximum level, making sure the athlete's working at a very high threshold. One of the most effective ways to train this is during short interval runs. So you can see there we talk about some short intervals. An example of that would be, someone maybe working anaerobically for 10 seconds, and then having 2 minutes break. Flat out again for 10 seconds, 2 minutes break. Okay, so it just sort of shows one way in which you could do it. They talk about work ratios or work-rest ratios of 1 to 3. What that means is if you work for 10 seconds, you rest for 30 seconds. That's what they mean by 1 to 3. Another important part of the anaerobic training is that, especially with a lot of teams that play aerobic games, so rugby league, soccer, football, AFL, what they'll do is they'll spend a lot of their pre-season working on the aerobic system, so building up that aerobic base. But then as it gets closer to the start of the season, so a few weeks out from the first competition game, the anaerobic training becomes a lot more specific and becomes a real big part of the training program. And I've just given an example down the bottom here. You could do something like 15 times 40 metre sprints under 8 seconds. They go every 20 seconds. So they complete, that's very anaerobic. It's going to elevate the heart rate very quickly because there isn't much of a rest. They're only getting really 12 seconds rest. All right, so this is going to make the heart work a lot harder. It's going to build up their anaerobic threshold, so how long they can perform at that level before they get fatigued. So that's our anaerobic training. And on this last little page here, what I've got is just some different information that if you were writing up a program based on the different energy systems, what are some things that you could look at? So for example, if we look here at running, so there's the running, we've got ATP system, the lactic acid system, and the aerobic system. So an athlete who's going to run 50 metres, there's the time, let's give them 10 seconds to do it. So this is going to be very anaerobic. They might do 5 sets of it, of 10 reps, work for 1, rest for 4. So if they're working for 10 seconds, they're going to get 40 seconds break. There's the 1 to 4. And the type of rest could be, they might be walking around, they could be stretching, or they could just be sitting still. So that's example there. Same for the lactic acid system. So let's just say a 200 metre run. There's the time frame which they're going to do it in. 4 sets, 4 reps, is going to be 1 to 3. So if it's 30 seconds, to complete it in, they're going to get a minute and a half rest. And finally, the aerobic system, they might be running 600, let's say 600 meters. There's the time frames they got for it. They're going to do only probably going to do one of them, but 5 reps. Work for one. So you work for a minute and 45. You then get, what's that, maybe 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes, I think that might be. You get that rest before you go again. So that's an example there. So just when putting different training programs together at different stages of training seasons, these are some things you might want to keep in mind. It's a nice little table to have a look at to give you an understanding.